earlier on the don'ts with plagiarism, I want to be real specific here. So what's considered plagiarism? If a student, these are student applications. They're not chapter applications. And philosophically, maybe we don't agree with that, and I'd be happy to discuss it with you. I know that you as a teacher help a lot of students, and some of them have similar SAEs. But to get right down to it, these are student applications. Based on this student's experience, they're not chapter applications. Though you may be the commonality as the advisor, they're not chapter applications. And to be quite honest, they're not your applications. They are student applications specific to that student. So start with that understanding, and then think through the fact that if you use an application as a reference, another student had a similar SAE, a similar specific project, may have even worked at the same place. Okay, that's okay. That's not bad. And then automatically disqualify that student. And if you show them the previous student's work and say, hey, if you're getting confused on the skill piece, if you're getting confused or how to list your specific responsibilities, here's one that is done well that might be a good reference. Make sure that you either sit down and go through that with them, or that you double check it on the back end that they didn't just go directly copy. Because if you sign off on it and then we have to flag it and say, hey, we can show you the specific pieces that were copied and pasted, and then you come to us and explain with a great deal of passion, I didn't know, this is a really good kid, I can't believe they did that, I didn't give it to them. At that point, none of that's going to matter. What matters is it was turned in, it was the exact same wording as someone else's application, and the application is going to be disqualified. And we don't want to do that to anybody. So what constitutes plagiarism? Well, any portion that is directly word for word from another application. Now, there's a computer program that's going to catch that. It's looking for strings of words that are identical to previous applications that have been turned in and evaluated. So we get a report saying it's 3%, 10%, 18%. And if you're worried about, well, what's my percentage? What can I be without going over? Don't worry about that piece, because it's not a specific number. It's not if it gets over 12, you're out. If you're under 12, you're in. It's the content that's copied, okay? If you have every one of your students begin the skills, the accomplishments piece with, I'm really proud that I've accomplished several things in my SAE. I want to highlight 3 of them for you in this application. The first one is, if that's identical for everybody, it's going to catch and flag that. When we look at the content and say, that didn't tell me anything about the SAE, I'm not as worried about that. Now, I would be cautious having everyone use the exact same word for word intro. But so a human being is going to look at that once it gets flagged and say, okay, they didn't tell me anything about the SAE. That's a pretty generic intro that several people could use. However, if I then get into, I've increased by 3% over 12 months, and in the next 24 months, I anticipate growing by 7%. And if they get into specific pieces, I've worked this many hours, learned these skills, if they start copying and pasting those specifics, if it's one sentence, if it's a paragraph, if it's a whole page, and we've seen all of that, that's where you're going to get into issues of, is that student's own work, okay? Questions that we get about, well, how much is allowed? If I've got a whole application and you catch me with 2 sentences that are directly copied, I can tell you what was done at National FFA last year. If it was specific to the SAE, if it gave specific content, the explanation given was plagiarizing and taking somebody else's words word for word is never okay, whether it's 1 or 2 sentences or half the application. So if you wonder, what's my percentage, what can I get away with? The answer is, don't have any specifics directly copied and pasted, okay? If all of those students that you have that are placed on a poultry operation, well, they all do the same thing. They check feeders, they pick up dead birds, and they monitor water. They can all do the same things. I understand that. Make sure that they write it to their experience. What we're looking for is when they come in and they are word for word, same percentages, same exact listing of what they did. When that's the case, and I can compare it back to a previous application, when Ken Lasson's application is word for word in sections to Brandon Ray's from 2 years earlier, that's not okay. And I realize they may have done some of the same work, and maybe philosophically we need to continue to talk about that. But that was Brandon's application and his experience. What is mine? So I would encourage you to understand that with plagiarism. Let me finish that thought with this. Can a student plagiarize themselves? The answer is no. If a student turned in a swine entrepreneurship or swine placement application, because they have some hogs, they also have beef cattle, and by their senior year, they want to turn in diversified livestock. And we run a report that says, oh, this one's just like this one from 2 years ago. Well, it was that student. You can't plagiarize yourself in what we're talking about here. If it's a student's application and their experience from previous year, however, you can plagiarize your brother, your sister, your cousin, family members. When we work at the same operation, that was their experience, not yours. So understand that you can take from your previous application as a student, not someone else's, regardless of who that someone else is. I think that horse is probably dead. Maybe we need to quit beating it. But is anyone